Locked On Sports Atlanta on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Good evening and happy Sunday. All of you Hawks fans out there, appreciate you for checking in with us. I'm your host of the evening, DeShaun Tate. Make sure you give me a follow at Tate's Take Hoops. Also got my dude coming in, and not nearly as great looking and beautiful as Tanitra Batiste is. Nonetheless, still got to show my dude Caleb some love, man. I had an opportunity to bring him in. I said, you know what? Let's for old time's sake, bring in my dude Caleb. Give him a follow at ATL Johnson 18 from 92.9 The Game on Caleb Johnson. So appreciate him for coming on with me on this evening. And listen, we got what I like to think should be pretty powerful and packed of a show for you guys on this evening. I get it. It is resulting ultimately in a loss for the Atlanta Hawks, that being a 128-104 loss for the Hawks, in which it was a little bit of a rough one, but I saw some things that they could certainly be working on. I saw some good things too. We'll talk about exactly whom we saw those good things from and didn't see some other great things from coming up later in the show, as you obviously are going to talk about some grades, kind of preface things at first by asking Caleb early in the show, give me some of the keys to victory for this Atlanta Hawks team. So we're going to go over that a little bit. And also, where is the wingman when you need him? Got a couple guys out on the IR from a shooting guard and small forward position. Got to figure out how the Atlanta Hawks can overcome those obstacles. And also, as we get ready to prepare for the number 1 and number 2 pick meeting up for the very first time, Zachary Resache supporting the Atlanta Hawks, obviously, jersey, and Alexander Sarr supporting the nation's capital and the Washington Wizards. That being said, first, let's get this out of the way. Today's episode of the Locked On Hawks POSTCAST is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Caleb, I was waiting to see. I knew it was too good to be true. I see it 2-0, and I'm like, you know how I live. I live by, that of which, listen, beat the teams you're supposed to beat. They did that, right? And then at least be competitive against the teams that are clearly either better than you are, or, teams that are equal to you to some degree. And they did that for a good portion of the game, but they didn't finish off well. Asking you about a couple things that kind of stood out to you in this game, in addition to giving some grades on some of the key things that you figured the Atlanta Hawks would need to do in order to come away with a win.
Yeah, DeShaun, I think first off from this is just the fact of, when you say that score, 128-104, what a lot of people are going to come away from this because, and I don't blame them. I know you're a basketball man, DeShaun, but we do live in a football realm of the country. And
do we really?
Yeah, man. So a lot of people, going to be watching Sunday Night Football or whatever might be the case, and they might skip over this one for the Atlanta Hawks. And so what they'll miss is they'll go, oh, Hawks got beat by 24 points. So, this Hawks team, not very good, and the Thunder, oh yeah, we know them, top seed in the West and all that sort of stuff, and so that'll be when this comes up on the ESPN tomorrow, it'll be a very brief. We'll talk about what SGA did. Oh, he's incredible. Oh yeah, blah 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 blah, all that sort of thing. OKC wins by 24. What they're gonna miss is the fact that the missing pieces from this Atlanta Hawks squad, which you mentioned we'll talk about in a little bit. But the other part of this is that even with the guys who played, who some of them, a guy like David Roddy, you're not even expecting to hit the floor this early in the season. But when it does happen, they were competitive. And I thought, outside of the fact that Jalen Johnson and Dyson Daniels go a combined 6 for 24. And I mean, it's just going to be, DeShaun, it's just going to be really hard to win any basketball games when two of your starters like that shoot the ball that poorly. It's going to happen, but it's just really hard to win. And yet the Hawks were competitive for a lot of this game. I mean, up by as many as 10 points in this one, started the fourth quarter up by 3. And so that's more of the thing that I want to take away is that, sure, did they absolutely, poop the bed in the fourth quarter, and especially those final like 8 minutes or so? Yeah, they did. But that shouldn't discount what they did for the previous, 3 quarters and some change that I felt like was pretty competitive when they had plenty of reason to punt on this game, quite honestly, because as you mentioned there, you talked about the fact that Washington coming up, this is the first game of a back-to-back. Far more concerned about an Eastern Conference team and an Eastern Conference team in your division than you are a Western Conference team when you're going to their place and you're shorthanded.
I think the good thing for the Atlanta Hawks here is the fact that when you just, in theory, look at this roster versus this roster, just this team versus this team's success last year versus this team's success, and the trajectory that it just feels like the Oklahoma City Thunder are on versus the trajectory that you just feel like with all the moves that were made or lack thereof for the Atlanta Hawks and what they are on. The Atlanta Hawks kept it, I'm all about competing. Keep it competitive. Just be competitive. Sometimes, there's going to be teams that are just going to clearly be better than you are. But your game doesn't necessarily have to show the world that if you're the Atlanta Hawks. And I think that they did a very good job of just being competitive, sticking it out, led the first quarter and second quarter in terms of leading in the game by that point. Now, I like to see that from them. It looks like they were giving OKC some fits, and obviously there was a little bit of recent familiarity there between both of the teams because they did play in the last game of the preseason. That being said, however, let's just be honest. Like Oklahoma City did what Oklahoma City was supposed to do at the end of the day. And so because the Hawks stayed in the game as long as they did, and to be honest with you, I was a little impressed by the fact that it just kind of seems like they kind of kept their cool. They didn't go out there and try and do anything that they, don't typically do. They kind of controlled the pace. They conserved some energy. They kind of kept things simple a little bit, but this is also an OKC team who is just really young. You can see the difference in the chemistry that they have between one another, and really just being a transition team and just really the camaraderie that they have built around one another. I mean, for crying out loud, the Atlanta Hawks have 2 players that they put in the starting lineup on tonight that one of the guys had never started before, and the other guy has only, been in a Hawks uniform for 3 games that count. So I kind of want to move forward before we get ready to go to a break with some of the grades, because I did ask you a couple questions. You did mention that they needed to stay out of foul trouble was one of the things. Feed Zachary Risachet, which was something mutual that we both shared in terms of what the keys to the game would be, and out rebounding Chet Holmgren, which is really, really tough to do, especially with the way that he's been playing as of late. What were your grades for those individual areas?
I mean, I think they did a good job with the fouling situation. Even if Jalen Johnson, was one who really kind of did get into trouble, especially at the end of the half. And then ultimately, kind of closer to the end of the game, but then things got out of hand and maybe he partly contributed to that. But it was more so outside of Jalen. I think they handled it a lot better. that was the thing that was concerning, last game against Charlotte was early on, you had Dyson Daniels getting foul trouble and you had Beat Crushy getting into foul trouble. And those were the two guys who were going to be the main responsibility of guarding LaMelo Ball. And when you knew Dyson was going to be the guy who was going to be handling SGA in this one, and then Lou Dort, he's a very good basketball player. Like, don't get me wrong, that man came out aggressive tonight.
Yeah, he did.
He really felt like had a point to prove in this one. And so dealing with that without getting into foul trouble, I thought, everyone outside of it was Jalen and Garrison were the two who really kind of pushed things to the brink. And so for that, I think you handled it pretty good. As far as getting Zach involved, feeding the Frenchman that I sent to you, that's more of just like, hey, this guy's making his debut. And you want to get him involved because I feel like that's more important than a early season win. His confidence, how that's going to affect their next few games, far more important than honestly than them winning a basketball game. But I think they were able to do a little bit of both, at least until the fourth quarter kind of hit, where Zach finishes with 13 points and shoots 6 of 12. So his shot able to go, get some confidence going for the young kid, and that was a really positive one. Rebounding, I think that was just going to be a tough thing to do, even though last year, or at least I know that OKC not particularly great on the offensive glass, so they stayed in that. But yeah, so I feel good. Maybe give them a B on those things, and kind of come away with a hey, for 3 quarters and some change, you played a B, and then for the final stretch, you used more like a D or an F, and that's how you end up getting beat.
Yeah, you mentioned something about a guy named Lou Dort, which I felt like Trey really was going to have his hands full. He was going to make all his money on tonight and his conditioning. When you've got somebody like a Lou Dort who plays as good defensively, in addition to how good this team was defensively on last year, being somewhere top 2, I believe, in the NBA, maybe even number 1, a large part of that because of him. And then you add Alex Caruso to that coming off the bench and how good he is actively on the defensive end as well, was just definitely going to be making Trey Young work quite a bit. Nobody expected Lou Dort to maybe shoot the basketball or improve as much as he has this year in doing such things on the offensive end. On the other side of the break, we're definitely going to get into where's my wingman when needed, because I definitely got some of my own personal feelings towards some guys that I've been seeing sitting out already this early in the season, especially after having some really good games. We'll get into that on the other side of the break. Hey, you. Yes, you. I'm talking to you. Are you tired of waking up extra early every Sunday morning trying to figure out how and where to place your bets? How about delayed text message replies from your own personal bookie conveniently when it's time for you to cash out, or even searching for a home to place your money line spreads or over unders on Thursdays, Sundays, or even on the big one on Mondays that caps off the week? Never fear, the solution is here. That would only mean one thing and one thing only. That being where you can start the season with a big return, not a little return, a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets. If you win your first $5 bet, make sure that you go and visit FanDuel.com in order to get started. Again, that's FanDuel.com. I've been in many of these positions my own self, plenty of times where I'm just trying to figure out where can I go to place some bets, where can I go to make some money and get Breslin some diapers and have a little bit of extra change so that I can go have me a couple cold beverages after a long day at work. As you know, it's time. Holidays is going to be coming up. It's going to be time to start spending some of that money. Thanksgiving dinners is going to be expensive, especially if you're the person doing it in your home. Same type deal with Christmas is rolling around. God forbid you're like me and you got a baby who's got a birthday right around Christmas time to go along with all of it. I like to think you should only get one present, but that's just on me. One thing that is also going to be on me is making sure that I find the time to put my bets in. You go and do that at FanDuel and make sure that you realize that there's no other better place to go and put those bets in than for that to be at FanDuel. Again, just as a reminder, you start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. That is FanDuel.com to get started today. Caleb, it's so hard to find a good wingman these days. You know, if
You're
someone
not dating,
would
are
have,
you?
well, no, I mean, listen, I'm
trying to get you in trouble, DeShaun.
no. You're not gonna get me in trouble. And listen, I don't run around my house, Caleb. I run my house. Let's just make that very,
Okay.
very clear. Just want to
Okay.
make sure that we understand the precedents. However, that being said, I feel like it's true. And the reason why, it's not about being true for me, it's about being true for this team. I was all about starting Zachary Risachet, right? Out the gate. You go in, you take your number one pick, you start your number one pick. In theory, that's the way that it's supposed to be. And there's no questions I think that there is to ask when you think about who that starter will be midway through the season. Got to be Zachary Risachet. Huge disappointment if it's not. And I'll be honest with you, I'll put my foot in my mouth a little bit because if there hasn't been anything that has surprised me, and if there's some kind of silver lining or optimism that I've been able to find this team, and you remember me talking to you coming into the season, I was not very happy with the moves that were made and the ones that were not made. And I was not very confident or optimistic or very positive in any of it. Dyson Daniels on the defensive end, especially coming into this game, leading the NBA in steals, 7 total, averaging 3.5. And then Zachary Risachet, who's looking a lot. I don't know if he just looks that good or it's just I had really low expectations of him. Nonetheless, he stepped in. He looked great. He looked like a starter for a guy that, that is a number one pick and still probably, trying to iron out some wrinkles and things like that. But I'm not really happy about not seeing DeAndre Hunter playing. A guy that I feel like lives on the IR and for over the course of I don't know how many years, I feel like so much depending upon if he's going to play or not. Put him on the bench. I'm all for that. Let him contribute coming off of that. It looks like he just feels much better and just much more comfortable. But not playing is something that I'm not necessarily in love with. Bogey, totally different conversation. The man played over the offseason, Olympics, all the other stuff. I'm willing to give him a pass. But I'm tired of giving DeAndre Hunter a pass. I want to know what says Caleb Johnson. Talk me off of this ledge because you made a move on Herter and Reddish and some of the other guys. This is the wing you kept. And it feels like he's never healthy when you really need him to be. If you're not healthy going against a team that had one of the best records in the NBA on last year, then who do you make sure that you're healthy against?
It's game 3, DeShaun. It's game 3. I think this is a situation where they know that they need to play 82 regular season games and hopefully some playoff games if they can get to that point. And so when you have a guy who has historically gotten hurt and you want to monitor those things, you take these opportunities, you find them in the schedule, and OKC being one of those teams that you go, hey, we're going to rest him. Because I don't think there's anything really serious. I think the more serious thing is what's going on with Bogey, just because of the number of games that he's played and because of his summer with the Olympics. But with DeAndre, this is far more on the we're going to be conservative or we're going to be safe than it is anything else. I don't think it's anything to panic about or overreact to. It's just one of those things that An Eastern Conference matchup against Washington will be far more valuable to the Hawks in the long run than the Oklahoma City Thunder. And so I think you have to be smart about all of these things. Doesn't always necessarily make it fun. And when you have the narrative already built in with DeAndre Hunter, this is what comes with it, is then you have a lot of people who are going to be like, oh, here we go again. And I really don't think it's that. I think they're trying to prevent the here we go again by doing this.
Yeah, I think it doesn't help the fact that it's two guys that are sitting out that are both wings, much needed. Some of your most, tenured guys that you have here on this roster. I don't think that helps the situation very much. Guys that saw a lot of time in some very critical moments for this team. I don't think that helps very much. All of these things, all of such. I don't know. It just, maybe not necessarily either one of those guys being, primary ball handlers by any means, but more so the fact that these are two guys that I feel confident can handle the ball well enough when there's positions where Trae Young is getting double teamed and then he has to, forcefully pick up his dribble, find someone to give it to and make a move off the dribble to try and go get a basket or a pull-up jump shot or somebody to, cross court pass to shoot for three or something along those lines. And we didn't get that. And I'm definitely a little bit disappointed because that option just did not present itself. Again, willing to give Bogey Bogdanovic a pass, not as much DeAndre Hunter. Gonna get back to it on the other side of this break. We're gonna kind of break down coming up tomorrow's game between the number one pick being Zachary Reese-Shea facing off. We'll get a chance to see for the very first time against Alexander Sarr. The Washington Wizards coming to town. Remember, beat the teams that you're expected to beat. I'll tell you what I expect to happen. And Caleb will definitely let me know if this sounds absolutely crazy or not. I have a really good feeling that it will right here on the other side of this break. What time is it? Game time. Woo. Everyone remembers where they heard that for the very first time and where you purchased tickets with Game Time. You'll always remember that too. I remember my first time purchasing, so easy and simplified, nothing overly complicated. All my friends were impressed by how easy it was to navigate with only the lowest prices guaranteed, virtual views of the game from our 2B seats, and top tier customer service if you're anything like my mom and have a ton of questions. There's always somebody to help assist you in any of your questions, any of your needs. There's so many different options you can scroll through. This is not just for sporting events, also for concerts as well. Feel free to go and check out Game Time. I'm telling you, it is one of the best things that you're ever going to experience. Again, it's so simple. It's simplified for you, very easy to navigate. And just the prices are just as low as you can possibly even get them. I mean, I remember, feeling like, hey, maybe if I go down there to the game and try to maybe, find me a scalper or something, somebody try and scalp some tickets and maybe try and get them for the low or something like that. Maybe I can get them for, a really cheap price. Game Time ended up being even lower than the scalpers were going to try. And then I didn't have to worry nearly as much about if the tickets were real or not. And then I'd be super disappointed when I get all the way to the front door and find out that the tickets were fake. You don't have those issues when you purchase your tickets on Game Time by any stretch of the imagination. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA, LOCKEDON GameTime for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. Woo. Caleb, we got a big time game coming up on tomorrow night. Couldn't come soon enough, especially when we found out the end result to this one on tonight. Again, that ended up equating into a very unfortunate 128-104 loss for the Hawks. Inevitably, you knew that a loss would come at some point. Didn't know when that would be. Had a good feeling, just being super transparent, that would be on tonight against OKC. But nonetheless, hung in there. They fought really hard, tooth and toenail, and they competed. And that's really all that we can ask. I'm going to need a little bit more than just competing in the next 24 hours when they invite the nation's capital to come in. I want to know from you, Caleb, what the expectation is, because I haven't been seeing nearly as much of Alexander Sarr looking nearly as good as Zachary Risachet, if I'm just being really honest. That's a plus because I'm not really sure that I could have guaranteed that coming out of the draft and, obviously into the beginning of this season. Obviously, it's still early, but it just feels like it's a really good fit. By the way, Zachary Risachet, I don't know if I'm the only one. Am I on base with this, Caleb, with feeling like it kind of reminds me of like a Kyle Anderson? I know we call Kyle Anderson slow-mo, but he just kind of has that Kyle Anderson type of game, very versatile. What are your expectations when you see this matchup, not just between the teams, but also between the number 1 and the number 2 pick when it rolls around tomorrow?
Well, I feel like, not to like rain on the parade, but the games, because you got to think, DeShaun, not only are you going to get the Hawks hosting the Wizards on Monday, their very next game is going to the nation's capital to face the Wizards. So they get this team in back-to-back games, not back-to-back nights, but back-to-back games.
Sure.
And I feel like the number 1 pick and the number 2 pick are going to play a very small role in the overall conversation of these games. That's just simply because Zachary Risachet's role is a bit smaller on his current team with the Atlanta Hawks because they're a better basketball team than the Washington Wizards. Like, Washington fits more of the team who gets the number 1 overall pick type of team. Like we think of Victor Wembanyama a year ago when he went to the San Antonio Spurs. They won 21 games. Like no one cared. It was just like, get Vic experience, get him out there, see the big super tall dude dunk the basketball and block shots and do all those crazy sorts of things. And so I feel like a lot of people want to see the like, ooh, when are we going to get Zachary Risachet guarding Alex Sarr? And like, we will get some of that, especially if DeAndre Hunter is unable to go. That will impact things even more. But I just feel like it's going to be more of Alex Sarr is expected to be more involved in what the Wizards are trying to do than what Zach is when it comes to the Hawks. Yet at the same time, I mean, Zach's defense very early on has been pretty solid. And I think he even showed that more tonight against OKC, while his offensive game is getting, some time to grow. He's getting more opportunities, ends up career high. We're through 3 games and he's got a career high 13 points tonight. Alex Sarr in his last game for Washington, I think I saw he's had like 12 points, 6 rebounds, went like 4 for 10, and a big loss for Washington to Cleveland. So it's all these sorts of things of like, will people pull the clips of Zach guarding Alex guarding Zach, and all those sorts of things? Absolutely. Are they going to compare these guys' stat lines? Absolutely. Will it be a somewhat of a big deal that people will make if Zach ends up not starting and DeAndre does? Sure, those things will happen, but in the long end, like, everything is going to be just fine. And I would expect both of these guys to play their game, just more expectations for Alex Sarr. And like you said, a lot of disappointment maybe so far for Alex Sarr, but I think it's just because more has been put on him.
Yeah, I could see some of that too. And again, people are going to link these two together just like the other two. I don't even feel like I really have to go into mentioning names and things of that nature, but they are just going to be linked together just because of the conversation going into the NBA draft, right? And I really believe that this is just one of the back-to-back games against this opponent in which they really, really need to come out on top. And I say even for both of those games, without even dropping one, they're going to need as much of a confidence builder as they could possibly get, talking about the Atlanta Hawks. I mean, when you start focusing in, go ahead.
Well, just like, and how good would you feel about this team if you're able to say, oh, the Hawks are 4-1 and their loss is to the Thunder? You'd go
right. I take it.
To me.
Yeah, for sure. No. Everybody will feel really good about that. And then you got to also factor in that, that's a heck of a way to close out October. Because when you roll around to, November, you're looking at all the playoff teams right in the face now. You're looking at those Kings and Pelicans, Celtics, Knicks. I mean, up until the point where you got to face the Pistons, for crying out loud. And nothing is guaranteed in this league, as we all know. So hopefully we can go out there and get a victory for the home team, Atlanta Hawks, and obviously go on the road then and see what they have learned from their very first time going on the road earlier tonight. And maybe we'll be able to get a chance to get, DeAndre Hunter back, or see what's going on with Bogey. The one thing I will say when it comes to tomorrow night's game is, if there's one word that I have to put on the dry erase board to what this team needs to do to prevent a very disappointing and upsetting loss to the Washington Wizards, would be to cut down on the turnovers. I think we saw 20 of them tonight. Definitely wasn't very pleased with that. However, you have to expect some things to some degree. When you start talking about playing, a team who's just coming off of first place, ranked in defense. But the unforced turnovers is obviously something that is very something that's unnecessary and something that you just can't continue to tolerate. Caleb, I appreciate you for joining me on the evening, man. Thank you much for stepping in the clutch moment. Definitely have to do this again sometime, kind of bringing back some memories, me and Caleb Johnson. Appreciate everybody for chiming in. Didn't get a chance to get through all the comments on this time around, but we'll be sure to do that. Get Tanisha back up in here and let her steer the ship, if you will, for when we come up on Monday. Don't forget to follow along on social media, Locked On Sports Atlanta, as well as follow the page any and everywhere, and also anywhere that you find your favorite podcast. Signing off, Caleb Johnson, DeShaun Tate, Locked On Sports Atlanta on the Locked On Hawks postcast. Good night.